why did you choose Property Finder?
Ultimately, what we're trying to do is understand what is the customer's priorities.
All right, let's dive into our favorite subject, mortgages.
Your bank isn't going to give you that full information, that
Do
transparency.
you think it's fair to compare Dubai to London?
With the UK, it's a heavily regulated environment.
There's a natural evolution that I see happening in Dubai, which I think is incredibly positive.
So I can't just sit here and not have a discussion with you as a consumer.
You pay 10% less in Dubai than you do in London. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Home Finders, a podcast brought to you by Property Finder. I'm your host, Mohammed Kaswani. Today we've got a very interesting subject where we're going to talk to you about moving from the UK and the rest of Europe to the UAE. We have one of our very own, Sam Amidi, who leads mortgage advisory at Property Finder and has recently moved here, 3 months ago now, Sam?
Just over 3 months.
Terrific. Sam, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me
Very
on.
excited to be talking to you today.
Likewise.
Because, we don't get to spend enough time together in the office. So we do a bit more of it here, maybe.
No, yeah, you're always tied up in your room whilst I'm having to manage the floor.
That's very good. So thanks for making the time for this. So what we want to talk about is what we're realizing is tens of thousands of people are moving to the UAE, particularly from the UK, but also from the rest of Europe.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the UK, you're a subject matter expert. You've been here for 3 months. So, the experience of the move to the country is very much fresh on your mind. You also happen to be a subject matter expert on home buying because you've been in the mortgage industry for 10 years. I know I've been looking for you for many, many years. So, it's very good that we have you here on the team. So there are a few things that I want to talk to you about. So starting with, tell me about the decision factors. What was it that led you to say, I'm going to move to the UAE?
Yeah, so it's for me, it's an interesting move to come to the UAE. So initially, when I decided to make the move, obviously it come out of the blue, which was obviously contact from Property Finder. So let me just kind of take it back a few years. So about 8 years ago, I initially wanted to come to Dubai. So when I was in the financial industry about 10 years ago, which is when I entered the mortgage industry, after about 2 years, for me, when I'd come on holiday to Dubai, there was this real good feeling factor that I enjoyed about the culture. Now, bear in mind, I was only on holiday for 2 weeks. But since then, I regularly do travel to the UAE. And one thing
You're an MMA referee.
I am an MMA referee. So I travel to Abu Dhabi. I work with some of the biggest promotions kind of around the world. And one of them is obviously in the UAE. I'm quite fortunate to have traveled out here a good number of times. And every time I have traveled out here, I've been more and more intrigued about trying to move out here. So as well as, dipping my toes in the country a good number of times, for me, the culture felt right. The timing of it felt right to kind of bring my family out here. Obviously, Property Finder had contacted me with everything that's going on in terms of the economy in the UK. I thought the opportunity is the right time. My kids are growing up. For me to give them that safety blanket that I don't feel I had in the UK compared to what I get here, as well as the hospitality, the culture. I'd say one of the key things is obviously the weather, which in the UK, it rains 80% of the time, whereas here, I came at the summer period, which was probably the wrong time for me to come and experience.
That's right. You joined us. Was it beginning of July when you joined us, no?
Yeah. So I melted, literally melted.
I remember.
Do you remember? Yeah. So
I remember every day looking at you and say, I promise the weather is going to be nice. Just give it a few weeks.
And it has. I can't complain. So, as I said, for me, it was, there has been a build-up. There's always been interest since the past 8 years. And as I said, the opportunity arose. Obviously, speaking to yourself, looking at the culture, the diversity we got within Property Finder was kind of a key factor, an important part of my decision-making, as well as giving my family a better quality of living.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand from the perspective of a family man. Right?
Yes.
Moving here from London to Dubai, both major global cities, both diverse cities. if you were to, let's say, categorize or prioritize in order of priorities, the decision factors, was it the lifestyle? Was it, safety for your family? Was it the schools? What was the top factor? Was it the, working at property finder? Was it working with was it the people? What was it?
It was you. No, so for me, it certainly was.
I love you too, Sam.
The economy, obviously, in the UAE is, for me, it's a growing economy. It's pretty clear. There's more and more investment in the UAE region, which is great to see. And, not just from the perspective of external investors, but internally, the government are investing really hard in the infrastructure of the economy. And for me, you can kind of clearly see the culture. I'm comfortable knowing that if my kids wanted to go to the beach, for instance, here, which you can't really go often in the UK due to the weather, but I have that comfort element that they can go by themselves because they're a little bit older without me having to worry and stress, are they safe or not?
Yeah.
And for me, if I'm looking at it in terms of ranking an order as to, my priorities as to why I moved here, my family first, economy, infrastructure, the hospitality, and the culture.
We have great food in the UAE.
The food is good, to be fair.
I mean, to be fair, the restaurant scene in London is amazing. So you don't compromise much, I guess, by coming here to Dubai from London.
No, probably not.
And it is, to be fair, look, I mean, the weather, I know a lot of my British friends, they talk about the weather, but it's also the cleanliness of the city that I don't see anywhere else in the world, right? And just and I agree, by the way, on the safety factor. My family and I talk about this all the time, is this really is incredibly unique about Dubai, how blessed we are that, man, woman, young, old, child, you can be out and about midnight, post midnight, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you always feel safe in the city. And I think it's absolutely phenomenal. You're right.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Well, I'm very glad that we have you here. Of all the companies in the world, why did you choose Property Finder?
I mean, your first impression was a starting factor for me. I mean, look, I've done a bit of research.
This is not the Flatter Mohammed.
This isn't the Flatter Mohammed. But no, in all seriousness, I've done a bit of research in the market, and Property Finder itself is obviously a really known household name. There is a great culture, and it wasn't just speaking to you, but it was actually speaking to different stakeholders within the business. And as you're aware, I went through like a rigorous interviewing process with a number of individuals, and each one of them gave me that sense of feeling that there's a family environment, that we're all in this together. And for me, that's important, because the way I look at where I work is it's like your second family. You're with the individuals within the business than you are more with your own family. I'm sure my wife will probably want to disagree on that.
But I love hearing this, because this is not, funny enough, this is not the kind of conversation that we would have in the office.
No.
We had to come on a podcast for me to ask you the question of, why did you end up choosing us after all? So very, very happy to have you on the team. Now, let's double click a little bit into some of the practical stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe talk about cost of living. Right now, I hear a lot of people drawing comparisons about Dubai versus other global cities. And to be fair, I always think, look, there's no question that Dubai ranks amongst, the top 10, top 20 major global cities around the world. And if you want to compare cost of living to Dubai, first of all, do you think it's fair to compare Dubai to London or New York or San Francisco?
I mean, I'd say Dubai is in its own bubble when it comes to cost of living. There's certainly areas that I look at where I feel Dubai certainly comes across slightly cheaper. But then at the same time, there's also the lifestyle that you can easily get attracted to, which can become a little bit expensive here. As we like to call it, that bougie lifestyle. But I
learned that word from my kids not long ago.
Oh, did you?
Bougie.
Well, kids will probably laugh if they see this. So as I said, if you're kind of comparing it on a cost by cost basis, it's pretty much on par to an extent. But then again, it comes down to how you want to live that lifestyle. You know, you can live a very expensive lifestyle, which you can also do in London or New York, for instance, as you can do in Dubai.
Now, I think, and we spoke about this, you and I extensively before, and I think what we are concluding with proper research is that on a tax adjusted basis, your cost of living in Dubai isn't that distant from your cost of living in other major global cities. I think the one key factor that we debated was schooling.
Yes.
Right. So you save tremendous amounts of money on income tax.
Yes.
Versus what you would pay in most countries in Europe, even in the US, outside of a tax exemption. But there's significant savings that you get on the tax-free income.
Yes.
Right. But then it's almost, and I think when we compared housing, we also realized that your housing cost is on par.
Yes.
But what we keep concluding is, yes, on a median 2-bedroom apartment in London versus median 2-bedroom apartment in Dubai, pretty much on par. The only difference is the apartment in Dubai is much nicer.
Much nicer. And you get a swimming pool.
And you get a swimming pool, you get a gym,
pool.
You get access to the metro, you get all of these amenities.
Yeah.
So would you say, when you were to compare Dubai versus London, is it within the same cost of living? Is it an upgraded lifestyle? Is what you're saying?
Well, 100%. I mean, so whilst you are making the tax savings, for someone like me, I'm a family man. Those tax savings will naturally go towards the school fees, because here you have to apply for private schooling as an expat. But what you're doing is you're getting an upgrade on that schooling. So I've actually went to view a couple of schools over the past few days. I was actually at one this morning. And the facilities and what you're paying for is by far above, it's even by far above what you get in terms of private schooling in the UK. So in the UK,
so we're not comparing against public schools. We're comparing.
So even if we were to compare against public schools, which, as I said, naturally, in the UK, you pay quite a high amount of taxes. Your kids can obviously go to public schools. But even on a comparison to private schooling, and the reason why I can talk about this is because I've taught in a private school before as a primary school teacher, which you might not be aware of.
I thought you went MMA then mortgages.
I used to be a teacher, so I used to be a teacher first.
I'll try not to hold that against you.
Try not to hold it against me. And I've worked in a private school, and as I said, just getting a glimpse and a feel of the schools here is by far ahead of what we had in the UK. So whilst the tax savings I'm making is going to go towards paying for the school fees, I'm more than happy to pay that, knowing that my kids are going to have a better quality of living and a better education system.
But when it comes to school, the spectrum of cost, it could, range from X to 3X, right?
Yes.
From the schools that you're touring, are you seeing, reasonably good standards in, let's say at the lower or mid range of school costs, or is what you're talking about only the, sort of exclusive, fancy, big name private schools?
No, I think, when you compare...
What I'm saying is an average, what's your impression of the average private school in Dubai?
Dubai. So for me, what you're paying for, you're getting a lot for your money when it comes to private schooling. So whilst it feels it's quite expensive, and bear in mind, not every individual that's going to move over from the UK or any other parts of Europe is going to come with a family, So for a lot of people, they'll come single or as a couple. They will benefit from the tax savings massively, improve their lifestyle, and not have to obviously pay the additional costs that I'm having to pay. But as I said, in terms of the schooling, the value you get for your money, in my view, and as I said, it's early indications, I think it's well worth the uplift you get in the quality.
So did you take the girls or the kids to the schools?
Yes.
What was their impression?
Well, trying to keep the little one quiet was a bit difficult. So for the older one, so obviously I've got an older boy and a 12-year-old daughter as well as a 5-year-old daughter. My daughter, if I'm going to look at her impression, the 12-year-old, she was very impressed. She gravitated to the school, the culture. And again, it's very diverse because Dubai is a very diverse city. And I think that's, for me, is what I love, is that it kind of embeds from such a young age to when they grow up here. And I think that's important, you know.
And the curriculums would be the same as the
British curriculum, yeah.
British.
But the added benefit here you get is obviously as a second language they do Arabic.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yes.
Okay, that's very good. All right, let's dive into our favorite subject, mortgages. Right now, after 10 years in the mortgage business in the UK, and you've worked with the biggest brands in UK mortgages. You worked for Habito, for Better.com, for I think Countrywide, and a bunch of the big mortgage leaders.
Yes.
What was your first impression when you know? And I know we talked about this in the office, but let's say first impression that you went back home with. Something that you hesitated to tell me early on, but now that we're more comfortable of the local mortgage scene.
How long do we have to go through this? I mean, look, it's I won't lie, it's a very it's not a mature market like the UK and the US, which are kind of, you know, years ahead of where we are in the UAE in terms of processes. There's no kind of arguing that there's a lot of manual processes that are still involved in today's industry, in the mortgage industry, in particular, mainly with the banks itself. So whilst you can refine and simplify a process for our users and customers to try and make that journey as seamless as possible, the buck stops with the banks. And I think for me, it's a massive eye-opener when it's obviously a growing industry, and I struggle to understand why banks haven't progressed their own processes since mortgages became a thing for expats in 2002.
You know, I spoke about this openly with one of the leading banks in the country. They'd invited me. They'd invited me on a panel to talk about mortgages, and I drew parallels from my experience in the US, which was back between 2003 and 2008. 2007, 8. And I told them openly, I said, look, the US mortgage industry was far more digital 15 years ago than the UAE mortgage industry is today. So I do agree that we have a very long way to go. I think it's great that we have a mature legal framework, for mortgage real estate digital transactions, where buyers from expat buyers can feel comfortable that their rights are protected, their ownership rights are protected, that there's a regulatory body behind mortgages. Yes, can regulations and bank practices be a bit more advanced? Absolutely.
Yes.
But I absolutely agree with you. We have a very long way to go. Now, speaking of which, one of the key differences that I noticed when I joined Property Finder a couple of years ago is in the US, nearly 80% of all mortgages originated are done by intermediate channels, right? Not banks. What is it in the UK?
So in the UK, it is very similar. It's around about the 80 to 85% mark, and that's going to continue to grow because the banks want to go through intermediary channels.
But in Dubai, it's almost the opposite. I think, if I'm not wrong, about 60+% of mortgages in the UAE are originated directly by the banks. So, consumers don't go to brokers or intermediate channels or mortgage advisors. They go straight to the banks. Why do you think that is? What's your impression as a newcomer?
I think my impression is it's an awareness issue. And naturally, when you're quite new to kind of your new surroundings in a new country, you will probably gravitate towards going directly to your bank first to try and find that information. And rather than going out there to research the market or speaking to an intermediary who can give you that full advice, and actually give you access to everything in the market, because your bank isn't going to give you that full information, that transparency. They can only talk about their own offering. Now, for me, there is an awareness issue, clearly, and there's also a consumer trust issue. Because, as I said, mortgages have become a thing since 2002 for expats in the UAE, and it's still a very immature market at the moment, and we are moving into more of a mature market, but it's still kind of really early, and we need to kind of educate the consumers out there that this service does exist. It's a free service from us, it is anyways. And you need to utilize it because it's only designed to be able to save you money and give you the right advice on going with the best bank.
So, Mortgage Finder has been in the business, in the mortgage industry for 20 years,
Yep.
since mortgages were first allowed to expats. And Property Finder acquired this business 2015.
Yeah.
Right. Since then, particularly in the last 3 to 4 years, dozens of new intermediate mortgage channels are entering the space.
Yes.
And it's a good thing because I think it promotes the concept of mortgage advisory, which is something we like to see at Property Finder, because what it does is it means that consumers are more empowered, they have more
Correct.
choice, they have more advice, they have more support. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you a question.
Yes.
You're sitting in London, right, working with Better.
Yep.
Let's say what international best practice in mortgages is, right? I'm sure you spoke and interacted or engaged with various other players in the mortgage business.
Yes.
Why choose to lead mortgage advisory at Mortgage Finder?
So for me, your values align with the values that I have, which is ensuring that we do right for the customer. Okay, so customer first for me is huge, because it's our customers are the individuals that keep us going. Okay, keeps our business afloat. So by doing right for our customers, which unfortunately the practice is out in the UAE because it's not a regulated environment. Whereas us internally have implemented our own kind of regulatory framework to ensure that the consumer receives the best advice, and actually we don't benefit ourselves by going with a bank that's going to pay us the most. For me, it aligns massively with my values. And interestingly, some of the kind of real estates we've been speaking to actually in the last couple of days are also aligned to some of those values as well, which for them is important. They don't want to just sign up with any broker out there in the industry. They want to work with a broker or an intermediary.
That's
essentially.
terrific. I think, Sam, and I'll give you my perspective on this,
Yeah.
is there's a natural evolution that I see happening in Dubai, which I think is incredibly positive. And it's one of the many reasons why I'm a very strong believer in the city, is the real estate business is a people business, right? It's a relationship business.
Correct.
Right? In most mature markets, right? That's how real estate professionals behave and interact. I think back in its nascent days or early days, people used to take a transactional approach to real estate, when engaging with their clients. I think more and more of us, right, are taking a relationship approach. Because look, in financial services or even real estate, because real estate is quite often the largest transaction that one makes, right? Building that relationship of trust, right, gives you longevity in the industry. And I'm very happy to hear that more and more of our real estate partners are also, celebrating these best practices and making sure that consumers are getting the best advice. So let's talk through, let's say, the cycle of a mortgage and draw comparisons between here and the UK.
Yeah.
Product selection, right? So a home buyer sends an inquiry to a Property Finder, right? Asking about mortgages, and a member of your advisory team gets on the phone and speaks to that home buyer.
Yes.
The first question, usually, and I understand that your advisors ask a series of questions. They understand that borrower's situation, what they're looking for, the home they're looking to buy, their income, their other debts, etc., etc. And then the end result is a product recommendation, or this is the mortgage that we believe is right for you. How is that process different between what you see at Mortgage Finder, or let's say the wider mortgage advisory business in the UAE, and how practice was in the UK?
So I think the difference between the UAE and obviously the UK is, with the UK, it's a heavily regulated environment. I mean, it's very heavy. And rightfully so, because the consumer needs an element of protection, which is something that is lacking in the UAE in general across the board. But in terms of the actual processes ourselves and what we generally followed, and this is why I'm quite aligned with the way that we work in Mortgage Finder and how we service our customers, is it's very similar. We do an element of fact finding to understand the customer's needs and circumstances, and we make the advice based on the most cheapest and suitable product for the consumer. Okay?
So is it always the lowest rate that you would look for?
Not necessarily. Whilst we'll always try and find the consumer the cheapest product, there could be a need that the customer wants a slightly quicker bank, or there could be a requirement that the customer wants a certain facility, like an offset facility in their product, which means we'll have to look at and divert towards a different lender. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is understand what is the customer's priorities and make sure we advise them accordingly based on what is suitable for them.
Well, one of the areas, Sam, that I'm personally obsessed with, right, is we've built all kinds of systems and processes within our mortgage business to ensure that unbiased advice happens at scale. So I know with my eyes closed, when we get an inquiry, no matter who that borrower speaks to, I know that they're going to get the best advice.
Correct.
How is that governed in the UK versus, so for example, what I'm saying is, in the UAE, we do this because it's something that we choose to do, right? Naturally, we want to preserve the Property Finder brand. To us, the consumer trust is the most important factor.
Absolutely.
It's far more valuable to maintain, consumers' trust in our brand than it is to earn any income on that mortgage transaction.
Correct.
Given naturally the credibility of our brand. Now, that may not always be the practice, right? From a regulatory point of view, what I'm saying is there is no regulation in place that ensures or mandates that a mortgage advisor is providing the right advice. Is there such a practice in the UK?
Yes. So with every advice and recommendation you give a customer in the UK, and this is something actually interesting that you've mentioned that we're obviously looking to implement at Mortgage Finder as well. So whilst we've kind of self-regulate ourselves by having some controls and measures to ensure that our consumers are being fairly treated, in the UK, what you have is something called a suitability letter. So you need to be able to justify
a suitability letter.
Suitability letter.
Okay.
So a suitability letter, which is, as I said, something we will implement at Mortgage Finder in the coming months.
You got things up your sleeves that I
We've
don't
got
even
things
know.
up our sleeves. As I said, it's all to protect the consumer. So what suitability letter does, and because it's a highly regulated environment, it just means that the advice I am giving you as the consumer, I can back why I've given you that advice and recommendation. So it then becomes pretty much legally binding, my suitability and my advice based on the discussion I've had with you. So I can't just sit here and not have a discussion with you as a consumer and just send you an option and proceed with an application without justifying why that lender or why that product in specific is the best option for you. Okay. So this is something we will be looking, as I said, as part of our kind of self-regulating. Within
and this is a regulatory thing in the UK. It's not here, but maybe we could. I've got a workshop coming up with Dubai Land Department. This is something that I really think is worth bringing up.
I think we do. We need to.
It's definitely something that we should implement as quickly as possible internally. But I'd love to see it being implemented across the industry, just to protect the consumers. Now, I'll share with you my, also one of my first frustrations with the mortgage industry here is the application process, right? So in the US, you have a uniform or universal mortgage application form.
Yeah.
Right? Every bank, every broker, every advisor, every intermediate channel uses a form called 1003. In here, you have 25 banks that are actively lending in mortgages. Each one of them has their own application, different formats, different questions they answer. Yeah. They ask different requirements. What's it like in the UK? Is it like the US or is it like here?
No, I'll say it's closer to the US in terms of it's a very online platform. And generally speaking, the questions are quite uniform across every lender. The only difference is that they all have their own digital platform that when you are applying for a mortgage application to that lender. So it's all an online journey. Some of them will have slight differences in requirements for documentation, but again, it's nothing
Which some of
drastic.
our banking partners are starting to implement.
They are,
digital
yes.
applications finally.
Yes.
And I'm hoping sooner or later everybody is going to go digital.
You like to think so.
I'd really like to.
I mean, they
think
need
so.
to. They need to be able to support the demand that's coming from there.
Now, you know, the other thing that we choose to do at Mortgage Finder, which is supporting home buyers in navigating their purchase contracts, MOUs, etc. Is this common practice with the UK mortgage advisors?
No, and I think this is where we've got a very good practice at Mortgage Finder, where we ensure, again, as part of our kind of consumer and kind of brand protection for that individual, is we review what we call their MOU or the Form F here to ensure there's certain stipulations and protection in place. So should anything happen in terms of the property potentially being downvalued, that is not left on the buyer or our customer to have to pay a certain amount or a penalty for not proceeding because they can't make up the difference.
Okay.
So we go over and above to ensure that we support our consumers, and we don't need to be honest. But we've got a fantastic loan progression team. So as well as having our advisors, our consumers get that additional support where our loan progression team will work closely with the advisor.
So my understanding is not all brokers have a loan progression team in the UAE, at least.
No, and even in the UK, a lot of the kind of one-man bands, the two-man bands will essentially manage the end-to-end process without the additional support.
So what's the latest? Let's talk about a mortgage in the UK today versus a mortgage in the UAE today. So in Dubai now we have rates ranging between 4.25% and 5%.
Yes,
depending on tenure, the bank requirements, etc. What's it like in the UK?
So the UK, that range is actually more around 5 to 6%. On average, a 5-year fix in the UK is now 5.66%, and that's actually come down in more kind of recent weeks and months.
Okay.
You was floating closer towards an average of around about 6.5% 2 to 3 months ago.
So on that basis, with let's say a 2 million dirham property, right, or a 2 million dirham loan, just quick math here. The difference in your mortgage payment between Dubai and London is minus plus about 10%.
Yes.
So you pay 10% less in Dubai than you do in London.
Yep.
And you get a bigger apartment.
And you get a bigger apartment.
And a nicer apartment.
Correct. You probably get 30,
with a pool and gym.
More.
Naturally, you use the gym. I don't use it much, but
well, yeah. I mean, I haven't used it much recently, but yeah.
So okay, that's very good. Bigger, nicer apartment, less expensive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's in a nutshell.
Yes.
Now going back to mortgages. So after you get, you did your application and your product selection. You work with your advisor. I'm seeing a lot of ads, right, of people saying, we're 100 times quicker than a bank, and others saying we can finish a mortgage in 5 minutes or 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What's the true transaction cycle between the time you apply for a mortgage and the time you close a mortgage?
Yeah. So I'm gonna be very honest. There's obviously false advertisement out there, and I don't want our consumers to feel there's this perception that mortgages can be transacted quicker. The reality is that the banks control the pace of the process in most scenarios, whilst, as I said, we can accelerate an application process to give it to the bank. At the end of the day, the banks have their own internal procedures which can drive the pace of an application. So from our perspective, generally speaking, if you want to kind of have a quick turnaround from kind of start to finish, you could look at 6 to 8 weeks. There will be the exceptional cases where applications from submission to dispersal, which is completion, is the terminology when you're looking at the UAE to the UK. You will get exceptional, cases.
I remember
complete a lot
when,
quicker.
and this was before your days, when I was getting my mortgage, I challenged the team and saying, there's no way it's going to take 6 weeks, right? I used to do it in the US in 48 hours, no joke.
Yeah,
2006, I was closing mortgages in 2 to 3 business days,
yeah,
right? No way it's going to take 6 weeks. And then I challenged them and challenged them and challenged them. And I realized, yes, in certain cases, maybe 1 in every 300 cases, if all of your ducks in line, you know, the seller is in town and there's no NOC requirement and there's,
correct.
you know, there's no mortgage liability and the buyer's got all of their ducks in line, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, okay. You can close a transaction in 2 to 3 weeks. But then, yeah, I mean, even from my own experience, you know, leading a mortgage business, it was, I think, if I'm not wrong, it was about a 6 to 7 week process.
Yeah, and it's important to set that expectation as well for our consumers.
Agreed.
You know,
Agreed.
by turning around and saying that we can do it 10x quicker.
Now, how are valuations treated in the UK differently from the UAE?
So the difference with the UK and the UAE, so obviously with the UK, there are quite a lot of products where you'll get free valuation. But in terms of the actual price range, it can be quite similarly aligned to what you pay in the UAE. Now, what's interesting and probably what I'd say different in the UK is around about 40% of valuations is done by an automated valuation. Okay, so therefore means the valuer physically doesn't go out, and therefore an offer can get turned around at a lot quicker pace than what you get in the UAE. Whereas obviously in the UAE...
Are you telling this to our banking partners? Because I've been screaming about this for a couple of years now.
We need to.
You're not
we need to be
screaming,
talking.
but-
I mean, I'm screaming about other things at the moment, but this will be on the to-do list with them.
It's 2023. Like, it's about time with like certain loan to value that we allow automated valuations.
Well, we at Property Finder are obviously creating like an automated valuation, online valuation system.
Coming live any minute.
It's coming
now.
live soon, yeah. So, you know, the fact that the banks can't implement, surely there is a system out there where they can implement all the transactions that have occurred in the last 6 months or a year to drive like an automated valuation. And normally in the UK, if it doesn't meet that automated valuation, because the property, the purchase price is slightly higher than what the valuation is normally kind of giving out, then they'll go and do physical valuation. But where they don't need to, why would they bother? They just base it on automated valuation, they sign it off to the bank, and there's your offer.
Yep. And then the final offer letter, does it happen? Because I know, I've heard some drama here where, you know, banks make changes halfway through, you know, rates move, etc.
Yeah.
Can an interest rate or a change to a bank product happen from the time you get pre-approved to the time you close?
No. So whatever you've been offered is the rate you get offered. So normally an offer is valid for about 6 months in the UK. So you can hold on to that rate for 6 months. And the other good thing is if rates obviously drop during that period of time.
6 months versus 60 days here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what happens if the rate drops?
So during that period from when you got an offer to completion, if the rates dropped, normally, and this is why I always say a mortgage advisor is good, because we do this as well, actually, that if the bank rate has dropped, we will then speak to the bank and ask them to give you the new lower rate, which is
Can
what
you do that here?
You can do that with some banks, yes.
Okay, good.
Some banks might charge you a fee to change it. But as I said, certainly in the UK, your offer's valid for 6 months, which is, it gives you enough time, right? I mean, the transaction doesn't normally take that long to purchase, but if you're buying a new build in the UK, it can do.
Now, last words or advice to a British family looking to move from the UK to the UAE, on, you know, maybe on general advice or on home buying or on mortgages. What would be your advice?
Yeah. So look, my general advice if you're moving from the UK or Europe to the UAE is always give it time to settle. Like, you know, when you're making a move from one country to another, it is a big move. It will take time, but always listen to the people around you that have gone through the experience. And I think this is one of the things that I took on board, is rather than trying to learn it all myself, is I took the advice of the individuals around me, which kind of helped accelerate my settlement within the UAE. When it comes to mortgages, look, it's speak to a mortgage advisor, you know, contact us at Mortgage Finder, absolutely. And if not, just speak to an intermediary, get the right advice. Trying to do it yourself, it's a very frustrating process. And as an intermediary, we're here to try and facilitate some of that process and take a lot of that burden away from you to be able to ease the process. And it is, as you mentioned early on, it's one of your biggest commitments that you make throughout your lifetime. So you want to make sure you get it right. You want to make sure you fall in love with a house, you've got the right lender, you've had the right advice and the right guidance throughout the whole process. And,
so you're saying treat your mortgage like you would treat your marriage.
I don't know if my wife will agree with that, but yeah, you could do.
Sam, Amidi, thank you so very much for joining us. We really enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. If you're looking to learn more about mortgages, we have a lot of resources, calculators, and information that would help you on Property Finder as well as mortgagefinder.ae, where a member of Sam's team can get back to you and provide you the right advice on getting a mortgage in the UAE. We hope you enjoyed our podcast. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, and help support our content so we can bring you more of it and help you make better, more informed decisions in real estate here in the UAE.